Hi class, happy Tuesday and happy last day of March. It is a beautiful March day. The birds are out. People are out mowing their lawns. So I apologize for that. Sounds like that lawnmower is not doing so great. Anyways, we are continuing our discussion of chapter 15.2, Mechanisms of Evolution. And our learning objective is answering the question, how do changes in allele frequency happen, and how do those changes cause evolution in a population? And I've already made a video talking about allele frequency, okay, and ways that allele frequency can change. So before we jump into the video, if you hear birds right now, that's a house finch here. So there are lots of house finches in my backyards. The male is red, the female is just a brown color. Okay, there are also American goldfinches too. They're not as common, but I do hear them from time to time. I bring that up. I set up a bird feeder. It's on this tree. No birds on it yet. It takes a little while for them to get comfortable with landing on the feeder, and then once they realize that the seeds are yummy, then they'll take over and spend all day on the feeder eating it real fast. Anyways, so let's jump to mechanisms. So there are two types of selection: natural selection and sexual selection. Natural selections come up quite a bit, and to review it again, in natural selection you have environmental conditions that are selecting for an allele of a gene that's best adapted for an environment. So with this crow example, the environment, so the color of the ground and the hunting habits of the crow are selecting for an allele that makes an orange trait. And so that allele frequency increases in the population while the green allele frequency decreases in the population. Over generations. This isn't happening overnight. This is happening in a population over time. Now, a second type of selection that it can also be very common is sexual selection. So in sexual selection, the opposite sex selects traits. And it's not about the environment anymore. It's all about making babies and being real attractive to the opposite sex. And so an allele that produces a more attractive phenotype increases in the population's gene pool. So this bird of paradise, this isn't going to help it survive in the environment. It will not help it catch any food. It won't help it camouflage. It won't help it fly away from predators. But it's going to catch the eye of a female. And it might look, that dance and those colors look really attractive. So because it can attract a female, it can have more babies than a less colorful, less charismatic male. And it'll produce more babies and also pass down the alleles that were attractive. And sexual selection is all over the place in the animal kingdom. Okay, peacocks, their bird feathers are real long, real colorful, and they may help with scaring a predator, but it won't help it camouflage, it won't help it catch any prey. Okay, more likely, these peacock feathers are to attract a female. So male, female. The same with this jumping spider. This bright, iridescent red and green and blue. It's not going to help the jumping spider stalk a victim. It's going to attract a mate. And the same with this lizard and our bird of paradise again. Now, in sexual selection, what's going on? You might have a mutation. So say there's a mutation which creates a new allele for this blue pigment that makes it just a little brighter. So now when it's a little brighter, this female bird of paradise, she's going to take notice. She might be more attracted to the male that had that new, brighter allele. So this new male might not only pick up one female, but maybe pick up a second or a third. So he's going to make a bunch of babies, which means that new allele that made that color a little brighter, a little more attractive, gets passed down. Even though it didn't help him survive in the environment, it did help him reproduce and pass down that allele. Now, when you have sexual selection or natural selection, there are directions which selection can go. So stabilizing selection, directional selection, and disruptive selection. And this is a great image, so if you want to pause the video and take a look at this to see all three in the same slide, you may. I'm going to break down each individual one. Now, in directional selection, you have one extreme version of a trait that gets selected over generations. So the allele frequency for the allele that gives the extreme trait, it increases. And so you often see this, and this is the textbook picture. You see graphs, like two lines. So you have a normal variation, that's a normal bell curve, and then a shifted one. So in this example, we have a population of woodpeckers. And so the woodpeckers that are born with an allele that makes their beak just a tad bit longer, they are going to be able to reach deeper into a tree trunk and grab more insects so they can make more babies and survive. So over generations, any alleles that make this beak longer will get selected. So you're going to have this direction going towards more extreme beak size, longer beak size, directional selection. Another example we looked at with the Darwin Questions worksheet, giraffe necks. Now, as mutations happen that create alleles in genes that produce a slightly longer neck, that will give that giraffe an advantage in the environment. So that giraffe that was born with a slightly longer neck, with an allele that was slightly longer, will make more babies. And so over generations, millions of years, those beneficial mutations that created an allele that produced a longer neck get selected. So we get a shift towards longer and longer necks. So directional selection, anytime you have a gene pool where one allele that produces an extreme trait gets selected for, that's directional selection. Now, stabilizing selection is sort of the opposite. So the middle trait selected in a population. So whatever allele gives this middle trait, its allele frequency will increase. So the example I have here is a clutch of eggs. Now, with this eggs, if you have too few eggs, you only have one, well, you're not going to make that many babies, and you won't really pass down genes, so you don't really want to do that. But if you have too many eggs, it's going to be hard to take care of them, and you might die in the process trying to support all these eggs. So there's this happy medium for a number of eggs that a bird will lay at a single time. That's been optimized for a nest to support, for a mom and a dad to support. Another example with babies, human baby weight, human birth weight. Okay, you look at a graph, it appears stabilizing selection happened for baby weight. Now, if you're born too small, you're probably underdeveloped. You're going to have a hard time surviving. But if you're way too big, you might cause problems when mom's giving birth, and you could kill your mom. And if mom dies, then you're not going to be able to help yourself. So there's some middle weight that balances being big enough to where you're developed and survive, but being small enough to where you don't kill mom while she's giving birth to you. And our last direction, disruptive selection. So disruptive selection is a case, it's kind of like double directional. You have two different extreme traits getting selected for. So there's whatever traits are kind of the middle version, any alleles that give this middle trait will decrease in the population, while alleles that give one extreme or the other will increase in the population. So this example I have here, so limpets, they are an organism found in tide pools, okay, and they are hunted by birds, seagulls, any type of shorebird. Okay, now in this environment, in this example, there are light-colored rocks and dark-colored rocks. There's really no in-between colored rock. So if you're born with a really extreme light color, you'll be able to camouflage in the light rocks and be fine. And if you're born with a dark color, you'll survive on the darker rocks and be okay. But if you're kind of like a gray, a dark, like a tan, a light color, like a middle color, you are going to stand out in both rocks. So you're going to get eaten. You won't survive. You won't reproduce as much as the two extremes. Disruptive selection. So in conclusion, Natural selection and sexual selection can change the allele frequency of a population's gene pool. Okay, and this selection can be either directional, favoring one extreme, disruptive, favoring two extremes, or stabilizing, favoring a middle trait. Okay, and all of these directions can change depending on the selective force. Now, let's zoom all the way back to my finches that are in my backyard. Well, I have some sexual selection going on with the house finches. Okay, this red doesn't help the finch camouflage. It eats seeds, it eats fruit, so the color doesn't help. But the brighter red is going to attract females. So we get a directional selection for this bright red color. Now, if the environment changes, and this is an urban environment, humans have killed predators. So let me go back. There's no real environmental natural selection pressure to camouflage anymore, because as humans we've killed a lot of the predators that hurt these house finches. So now that could change though. If a new hawk came around, or a new cats that we brought in like hunting and catching these finches, and they're really attracted to this color of red, well, the selective force might change, and you might see finches becoming less red because there's a new selective force. So as we talk about selection, natural selection, sexual selection, these directions of selection can change if something changes in the environment, or a new environmental force comes around that makes the trait that was selected for not the best trait for the environment, or not the most attractive trait for a female. Okay, I hope this helps. Keep working on your assignments. Bye, class.